Welcome back to the Life Skills 101 podcast. My name is Martin Curry, and I'm joined by my co-host Rebecca Weston. And today we'll be speaking with Sarah Morse, who's graduated with a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and mental health back in 2020. Now she's pursuing a doctoral degree in naturopathy at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. So, without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Sarah Morse onto the show here with me. Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Oh, I'm pretty good.
Hi, it's so nice to see you today.
Nice to see you. I'm so excited.
So I'm just going to start you off with just some more questions. The first is, if you were a fruit, what kind of fruit would you be? Important, this isn't your favorite fruit. It's what fruit you most identify with.
Okay. First comes to mind, I feel like a banana.
Banana?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty palatable. I think I'm someone that's for the masses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Most people like me. They enjoy me.
Okay, so banana, sure. Works for that. And during your time here at Carleton, did you have a certain favorite study spot to go to?
Probably the Starbucks in the library, or I liked fifth floor of the health sciences building.
Ooh, I haven't been there.
Yeah, that was the neuroscience floor, so it felt very
like home?
Yeah, it was mine.
Okay.
I had to swipe in, like no one else was there. I enjoyed that.
Those are the best times, huh?
Yeah.
So today we're here to talk to you about wellness and specifically looking at this from a naturopathic lens. So like before we really get into the questions, I just wanted to ask if you're able to explain sort of what naturopathic medicine is and why it's important.
Yeah, okay. So naturopathic doctors are primary care physicians that look at the whole person, so holistically. And what that means is we treat the body as an entire system. We're not looking at each system individually and how the systems interact. And with that, we look for the root cause of disease, often through blood work and elimination diets, and sometimes many, many months of really hard analysis to look at what exactly is going on within the person and what is causing them to feel illness, and how do we make them healthy. So we use a variety of different modalities to treat people. With that, sometimes it is medication, but not always. Allopathic medicine, so our GPs, medical doctors, they often use medication as the primary mode of treatment, whereas that's not always the case for us.
So like you studied, I guess, neuroscience then.
I did.
Then how did that transition into naturopathic? Because it seems like that's more of a physical, like bodily health focused area. So how did that transition happen?
Great question. So I was in neuroscience and mental health, and throughout my undergrad, I really became passionate about the mental health side, which I think was a little bit unexpected. I knew that I liked physical science, and I liked being able to, I like the idea of like slicing the brain open and figuring out exactly where the problem is, seeing the problem and recognizing
something
that
tangible.
Yeah, something tangible. And the mental health side, I think at the very start of it, I was like, what exactly are we looking at? Like, what is illness in terms of mental illness, if maybe it's less tangible? And then it was very quickly apparent to me in my classes that it is tangible, that there are neurotransmitter imbalances, and sometimes like physical, brain malformations that cause mental illness. So in my fourth year, I took this science communications class in lieu of doing a thesis. And a lot of what we were looking at was alternative modalities to treating mental health. And so I remember getting a topic. I was assigned a topic that looked at the correlation between yoga and anxiety. And when I first was assigned the topic, I was like, okay, kind of just thinking like, yeah, we've heard this one before, like, yeah, sure, I'm sure yoga helps, but, why do that if a medication would do it better?
Yeah.
And in doing my research on that and finding how effective yoga was in terms of treating anxiety, I was like, oh, that's really interesting and also really accessible, because yoga doesn't necessarily have to be, a hot yoga power class that costs $40. It can be following a YouTube workout in your room, which was something that I had started doing at the time. And from there, I started to think more about how can we treat mental illness without medication, or at least how can we supplement medication? And so I remember that came onto my radar. But I didn't necessarily think that I was going to be a naturopath at that point. It wasn't until I actually saw a naturopath myself for just my own health appointment. And I realized I feel like the link that was missing in my mind was root cause. And that was something that a naturopath really introduced was, okay, so your body's producing this symptom. Like, let's say it's insomnia. You're not sleeping. Maybe a doctor would prescribe you Zopiclone to sleep. But why? Right? Like, why are you not sleeping? Are you stressed? Are you anxious? Like, what is the root cause? What's going on inside your body? And I was like, duh, that makes so much sense, like
addressing the cause instead of the symptom.
Exactly. So yeah, that's, I think, my big pull is looking at root cause and how can we address that with alternative treatment.
I love that that's what you're doing. And that's how it kind of, it brought you to naturopath, because like I was having like health issues like a year or so ago, and doctors were like not really sure what to do. They basically just told me that I think it was like I was not allergic, but like so many stomach problems. And they were just like, just don't eat processed foods. And that was their only answer. Went to a naturopath, and like how in depth it is, it was just so much easier to find. And I found out like, oh, can't have gluten, can't really have dairy, like little things like that, just from like doing elimination diets, which you could do on your own, but having like advice for it, it's so much easier.
For sure. I feel like that is such a common story that I hear amongst my peers in my class, is that we all had an experience with a medical doctor where they weren't listening to us. And it's something that's, I feel like it's the same sort of like blanket statement of like, oh, it's just this. You should drink more water. Oh, I'm sure it's nothing. Like, here's an antibiotic just in case. And I feel like they typically, for me and my peers, again, I don't want to speak for everyone, but it was just that we had this experience where we weren't being listened to. And then we see a naturopath and suddenly it's like someone is not only listening, but they're advocating. And I no longer have to do the groundwork of advocating for myself, which is huge, because I shouldn't have to advocate for my own health to someone that is on my team. It is not the patient's responsibility to know everything about the human body. It is of the responsibility of their team.
The last time we spoke, you mentioned like the 80-20 rule.
So yeah, 80-20 is something that I think I live by all the time. And by that, I mean, 80% of the hard work, or, the scheduling and the finishing the assignments and the eating your leafy greens and going to the gym, but 20%, eat the dessert.
I really like that. Like, the balance is something that I think a lot of people struggle to find.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that as someone who personally struggled to find that last year. Sort of anecdotally, I did my capstone project last year, and I think total for the whole year, I did 12 all-nighters to get everything done.
Okay.
And that was like a really big point of trying to get everything done and trying to do the best I could, and in the process neglecting kind of the necessities I need to, like, have wellness in my own life and actual balance. So this is something I was going to ask later, but I think it's a good segue, is just in terms of practicing health and wellness, how can someone get out of the cycle of thinking, oh, it's just one more week when it comes to procrastinating their wellness? Because that was something I did a lot. It was like, oh, I just have to get through this week. I'll start eating better and exercising more and sleeping more next week. And then next week comes and it's
the same thing.
It's a cycle.
The reality is, until we retire, it will be the same thing. Every week is busy. And so, yeah, when does it start? Because as an adult, breaks are few and far between now at this point. So I think, just like I said earlier, is treat it with the same importance, treat your wellness with the same importance as you do everything else in your life. And that way it doesn't become something that you miss, because if you write or schedule in your calendar, if you're a calendar person, I love my calendar. If you write last 2 hours of your night are time for you, that's the time that you do your yoga video and you take a nice shower and you put your face mask on, if that's something that feels true to your wellness journey, and you write in your journal. Then now it's scheduled in, and you don't feel like you're not doing the things you're not supposed to be doing, because you like specifically blocked off that time and that that's for you. And if that's for you every single night, that is for you every single night. It's not a treat. This is something that makes you function, right? I think we often treat wellness as a privilege and not a right, and I don't agree with that. I think you have the right to feel homeostatic within your own body, and you should take ownership of that. Like, that's so empowering that you can you have the ability to make yourself, feel as good as you want to every single day, but you have to choose that.
I think it's actually wild that when you said that it's a right, it's not a privilege. I looked at Martin, his face went like, whoa, that's so true. And I felt the exact same way. I feel like a lot of people listening to this will also be like, oh my God, that's mind blowing. And that's just so sad that's like the hustle that we have in school is just like, you just totally forget that you are like, you're your number one priority.
Yes. And I think within academia, we feel so much pressure to grind and work hard, because if we work hard, then we will graduate with high distinction. And then if we do that, then we can do the master's program that we want. And if we do that, we get into the PhD program that we want. And then finally, we're in the career that we want, hopefully, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal. But something that I feel like I remember is all of the little failures that I had in undergrad and how insignificant they are now. And if anything, they just taught me how to be a more efficient student. And at the time they were so monumental and I identified with failing. But now I look back and it's like, who cares what I got on my first year chemistry midterm? That does not affect me in the slightest. In fact, I feel like I finally learned how to properly study and how to properly, manage my time. And the little insignificant bumps in the road that happened when I was 18, now at almost 25, are just funny stories and not necessarily things that, held me back. And I think it's really easy for us as students to get so caught up in all of the details that we forget big picture.
Last we spoke, you spoke about your own mental health struggles when you were in your undergrad. And how did you cope with that? Because I feel like your program, like I say this to, I swear, everybody who comes onto the podcast, like your program sounds so hard, but like it does, it really does. And you were learning about like your own brain while you were also just learning about science in general. So were you able to like take what you were learning and like use it on yourself, or like how did you get through it all?
Yeah. First year, second semester, it was the first time that we could take a neuroscience course. At the time, it was called Intro to Mental Health and Disease, taught by Dr. Kim Hellmans, who, for those that know her, she is just the coolest. And I remember the first time we had a lecture on generalized anxiety disorder, and I just sat there and I was like, oh, so all of these things, like feeling anxious all the time and the panicky feeling and the shortness of breath, I was like, oh, that's not normal. I had no idea. And that was the first time that something really clicked in me, that I'm like, there's a real diagnosis for this. That's wild. I eventually ended up going to a doctor here at Carleton, and they prescribed it as generalized anxiety disorder, which I knew because, 18-year-old me diagnosed myself from that lecture. Especially in my third year, I think when I look back, that was a year that was really tough on me. And I had none of the tools in place to support that. I think instead of reaching out to my social supports, I blocked myself off. I spent a lot of time by myself that year. And I think I was just hoping for the year to be over so that I could go back home to my parents' house and it would be summer and, I would see the sunshine again. I think that's something in Ottawa too that is really, really tough, is how tough and long that winter is. It's really easy to get down, especially as a student, when it's like there hasn't been sun or warmth for just months on end. And
it's exam season too, right? At the like middle of winter.
Yeah. So yeah, my mental health had taken a beating in undergrad, and I didn't do much about that throughout, I think, at its worst. So when I went home after my third year, I think things started improving a little bit. I was back home with my parents, and I was feeling a little bit better. And come fourth year, I started to put some measures into place that I feel like really made a huge difference. And whether that was intentional or not, one of the biggest ones that helped was my social circle. I was working in residence that year as an RF, and I finally felt like I had this whole community behind me that just supported me so much. And I felt like I had people to lean on, which was so huge. Yeah, I think having social support to lean on and open up to is so huge. And to finally talk about how I was feeling and not feel so ashamed of it and hide it and, be alone in my room all the time. Like that was something that I think was a game changer, was like having just people in my corner that knew that I was prone to, anxiety and depressive symptoms, and they were there. to help. So yeah, that was a big one for me. Another big one is just I finally got a counselor. So you know, those are things definitely like put the counseling in place. While you have people here at Carleton that are trained and able to do that for free because it's not cheap afterwards. Yeah, but
it's so interesting because you've realized that you had anxiety just like right as you were going to school. And now that you're in like your next phase of studies, like, do you see like the difference in how you treat, like, I don't know, like going through your studies from like then to now?
for sure. I think that my mindset around school is so much different now than it was in university. I think I identified so highly with being a student, and not only a student, but a straight A student in university, because that's what, that's where we were in high school. And so moving into university, it was like, I need straight A's because I'm a straight A student and that's what I am. If I'm not that, then what am I? I think a big part of the identity factor is too, I'm older and I have a better sense of who I am now. And if I don't get straight A's, I know I'm still me, and that's not the defining factor of me. It's maybe just something that I can achieve, but if I don't, that's a-okay. And I feel like I also treat school a little bit differently now, in that the content is something that I need to know in order to be the best practitioner that I can be, and not necessarily just to produce a grade so my mom will put it on the fridge. Because I think in undergrad, it was like, you're consuming all this content and, whatever, maybe it's going to stick with you. Maybe some of it will stick with you. But the most important thing is that you can go and write it down on your exam, hand it in, get the best grade you can.
Keep that GPA up.
Keep the GPA up. We need a 10.4 for high distinction. So that's, tunnel vision. You're looking at that. Whereas now I'm like, no, I want to make sure that I know this content so I can preach about it to my patients when it's time to have patients in clinic. And if I get an A because I remember the content, great. And if I don't, that's okay too. That's okay too, because my A does not define me. I want to be defined by, how well I can treat patients and how much patients feel comfortable in my care, not by the grade that I got on a transcript that no one's ever going to see.
Yeah. And like the difference between like university and high school is, with high school, the grades are of like, biggest importance. You're trying to get into university, and often the courses you take are just stepping stones to that. Right. And I think a lot of people, once they get to their bachelor's, they like start doing that and then see, oh, okay, there's a master's and a PhD I can go for. Like, they see these next steps and they still treat it as a stepping stone, even though this is a really like foundational time for you to become you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you can't let grades become your whole personality, because once you graduate and you choose not to do a master's or doctor, like what are you? As you said, you're not your grades.
Yeah, you're not your grades, and you're not going to be a student forever. And if you identify so deeply with your role as a student, I very much understand, and I was there. But then when I graduated, I was very confused, because that's all I've ever known as being a student. I've been a student since I was 3 years old, and now suddenly I'm just me.
You're just Sarah.
Who am I? If that's not me, then who am I? The moments in university that I have the fondest memories of, and it's never me in the library. I can't pick out like individual moments of me in the library. It's all just one big conglomeration of me sitting there. But my favorite moments were the ones in which I was obviously not studying, and I was spending time with friends, and I was at Panda Game, or I was at a diner having milkshakes after exams, like things like that. Those are the things that I look back on and I'm like, those were the best memories of Carleton, not the studying and not the grinding. And of course the grinding is important, but you as a whole is more important.
For sure. Personally, I try very hard to balance my own grades with my well-being, even though I suck at it.
Okay.
Because I try to say, okay, these are the courses I need that are the most important, and these are the ones I need to do well in. And I try to check every course and be like, okay, this one I need to do, this one I need to do. But it ends up being most or all in some cases. And I find like, okay, I've not accomplished anything in prioritizing, because I'm still in that mindset of everything is important. So like, this might be a hard question to answer, but just like, how do you get out of that, like, just mindset of thinking everything is 100% like deserves all of your attention, and like to the point where there's nothing left for yourself? Like,
right. I think what comes to mind is thinking big picture. 5 years from now, what matters? And that's true, I feel like, for every aspect of your life, but definitely as a student. In 5 years from now, will it matter if you got a 92 on that paper for that elective.
But here's the thing, it might, because if you're going for those like post-grad things,
Mhm.
that might be the difference maker. And that's, I think, the thing
That's
that
tough.
I
Yeah.
struggle with a lot is just like, what if that 89 to 90 difference in that one course makes a difference?
Mm.
And I don't know until I've actually gone through and made sure of that. So
Okay.
like it's kind of tricky, right? Because
I hear what you're saying. This might be a point that you don't want to hear, but what if that path just wasn't for you? And what if this takes you in another direction?
true.
Yeah. Which I know is not what you
It kind of isn't.
Yeah.
It's hard for me because that is what I see myself doing
For sure.
eventually.
For sure. And it's like, it probably feels like an A plus B equals C, right? You get this grade in this class and you do this volunteer work at this place. And it's like, if you do all the things right, you should get the master's. I'm assuming is probably how you're viewing that. And it's like, okay, what if, you did do maybe 10% worse on that one paper and that one elective to get you that one grade that you needed for that one GPA? Maybe, but maybe you spent your time networking with someone in the profession that's like your dream job. And maybe that connection is going to bring you further. And I'm not saying that that's exactly the scenario, but it's always like everything that you do in your life is going to help bring you to where exactly you need to be. And so trust the process, trust that you're smart and you're capable and you best. And at the end of the day, what's meant for you will not pass you.
No, I'm a strong believer in determinism. So, even though it kind of removes the thought that anyone has free will, it is nice to think that you can't really make a wrong choice.
Yeah.
It just won't happen.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I like it.
At the beginning when you said like, oh, we all know that like if you breathe, like yoga is good for anxiety, like these things, there are things that are good. But I was just curious if you could say some of the things that you learned about yoga and anxiety that maybe, I don't know, because they're so often told to us that it might just be helpful to like actually get a deeper understanding almost, or a deeper explanation of it.
Something that I do talk about often is specifically yin yoga. So in naturopathic medicine, we often talk about traditional Chinese medicine, which looks at yin and yang, which is everything being in balance. You can't have one without the other. There's no darkness without light, that kind of thing. And I remember when I first learned about that, as someone that's, I'm not necessarily spiritual, that was not really resonating. But the more you think about it, it really is just looking at the world as being balanced. So with that being said, yin yoga focuses specifically on yin energy, which is very much nourishing, is very grounding, very like soothing, as opposed to yang, which is very bright and energetic, very fast paced. So yin yoga is very slow. It puts your body into a parasympathetic state. So you rest and digest, and it helps regulate your breathing and your heart rate. I don't know the specifics behind what it will do for anxiety, but it will reduce at least acute symptoms of anxiety. So it's it's so easy. It also requires no skill. It's not like a power yoga or a hot yoga where, you're actually really working and sweating buckets and it's tough. This is something really, really calming. And you can just find like a 10-minute yin yoga on YouTube, or I know Carleton also does offer yin yoga. That's one that I would definitely recommend. Something else that I wanted to show you guys that I do when I remember that it exists is this breathing technique called alternative nostril breathing. So what you're going to do is, I don't know if the camera can see me, but you basically just thumb and pinky finger out. You're going to use, I don't know, I'll start with my pinky finger. I'm going to close my left nostril and then breathe in one full breath on my right side, and then switch, and then exhale on my left side. And so I just like to complete as many cycles of that as I can if I'm feeling really stressed out, which before a big exam, or maybe a podcast or something where I feel like I need to kind of get my breathing under control. That's a really easy one that immediately my heart rate it'll drop like 20 beats per minute. It's crazy. And I find that that's a little bit more effective for me than the box breathing, which is the in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, hold for 4. So that's a really nice, easy one that I like. And everybody has
a little this rad time. Yeah. Before we wrap up, did you have any like last takeaways you wanted to leave the audience with?
What's for you won't pass you, and you're human, so be kind to yourself. Be as kind to yourself as you would your best friend.
I like that.
I love that. What's for you won't pass you.
Yeah. It's a good one, right?
Yeah, it's so good.
Just
So good. It hits.
Saying so many profound things in this one episode. It's packed in there. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah.
Thank
It has
you.
been so enlightening to talk to you, and hopefully really enlightening for anyone back home who has been struggling with any sort of wellness issues in their lives, or maybe will in the future. But
Yeah.
thank you again for being
Cool.
on the show.
Thank you.
Lovely speaking with you.
Really
Thank
nice
you
meeting
so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, that about wraps it up for today's episode on wellness. I want to thank Sarah Morse again for coming onto the show with me. I'm Martin Curry, and I was joined by my co-host Rebecca Weston, and this is the Life Skills team signing off.